Hi, I'm Jane Savoie, and this is JJ, and this is Maverick, who you'll meet in some of our other lessons. And today's lesson is a really important lesson. It's probably one of the most important lessons that I could teach you. And this lesson is on forward. There are a lot of really subtle aspects to the meaning of the word forward. Most people understand that forward means the expression of forward, that the horse covers ground with long strides. But what we're going to talk about today is that we want the horse to think forward. And I'm going to discuss two different aspects of thinking forward. This is really an important concept, especially we picked Maverick particularly for this because you can see that he's kind of a laid-back horse. He's the kind of horse that would like to lie on the beach with sunglasses and a book. And you can also see that he's a very, very big horse, and JJ's not such a big person. So being the laid-back kind of guy that he is, if JJ had to use strong aids to ask this horse to go forward, she would get tired very, very quickly. So we want to be sure with any horse that the horse is electric or really, really thinking forward so that you can whisper with very light driving aids and the horse shouts his answer rather than you squeezing and grinding and exhausting yourself with great big aids and the horse barely responding or saying, you know, is there anybody there? So we're going to talk about two aspects of being forward. The first aspect has to do with responsibility. Whose responsibility it is to say, I want you to go this fast or this slow in each of the three gaits, and whose responsibility it is to maintain that degree of activity. That's the first part of thinking forward that we'll talk about. The next part of thinking forward will be discussing the driving aids, and I'm going to give you a step-by-step process of putting the horse in front of the driving aids so that you can do very, very little and the horse is very, very reactive to those very little aids. So first I want to talk about responsibility. You're the trainer, you're the rider. It's your responsibility to tell the horse how fast or how slowly you want him to go in each of the three gaits. Once you've decided how fast or how slowly you want him to go, your responsibility is finished. You should basically be able to take your legs completely, if you wanted to, completely off the horse's side, and the horse will maintain that degree of activity until you tell him to do something different. This is very important because if you take on the horse's responsibility for maintaining his energy by doing things, for example, in the walk, some people use alternate leg aids, left, right, left, right, left, right, to keep the horse going. In the rising trot, some people squeeze every time they sit down. If you keep the horse going with your driving aids, pretty soon you use yourself up. You use your driving aids up, and then you have no driving aids left to say to the horse, now I want you to go sideways, now I want you to do a lengthening, because you've just used up all your driving aids simply keeping the horse going, and that's not your job. So we're going to change the rules on some of the lazy horses, and that's an interesting point, talking about the expression of forward. Sometimes people confuse going forward over the ground with the fact that the horse is forward or not forward. I've seen a lot of horses go very, very fast forward over the ground, but they're still not thinking forward. In other words, when the rider gives a light driving aid, there's nobody home. The horse still doesn't answer. So going fast, speed, is not a substitute for being in front of the driving aid. So don't be confused by that. So you could arbitrarily decide, I want to go in a really slow trot. And sometimes you'll decide to do that. For example, if you go off to a show or a clinic and your horse is a little bit nervous and a little bit tense, you might decide to warm him up in a trot that's a little bit sub-power. Because by going without a lot of energy, you can relax the horse that much more easily. But whether you decide to go in a walk-trot canter that's sub-power or sufficient power or with lots of energy, It doesn't matter. You make the decision once you've told the horse how much energy you want him to put in each of his gaits, then basically you can take your legs away and it's the horse's responsibility to maintain that degree of energy till the cows come home. So let's say he doesn't maintain that degree of energy. What are you going to do? You are not going to give an aid to help him. Remember, it's not your responsibility to help him. What you're going to do is you're going to make a correction. Now, you have two choices as far as making a correction. You can either take your legs off and bump, 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 bump several times, or, just flip your whip up a little, JJ. Just flip it up so we can see. She has a long whip. The reason we use a long whip is that she can touch him behind her leg and not pull on the reins. Or you can tap, 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 tap with the whip, or you could do a little bit of both. Now, how do you decide whether you're going to kick with your legs or whether you're going to tap with the whip or do both? It totally depends on the character, the personality, the temperament of the horse. You want to do enough kicking, and I want to make a point about the kicking. Be sure that you really take your legs off and kick, kick, kick. That you don't squeeze, 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 or nudge, 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 because the horse can think that you're actually giving him an aid. There has to be a world of difference between doing nothing and making the correction. So the correction has to be really, really big like that so that he knows that he has been corrected. But getting back to how do you decide what you're going to do? It depends on the horse. Your purpose is to educate the horse, not to terrorize the horse. So if your horse is kind of a laid-back guy, like Maverick is here, JJ might decide to tap, 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 and kick, 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 kick at the same time. If you have a thoroughbred type horse that is a little more nervous and a little more tense, and you gave that much of a correction, you'd probably scare the horse. So with a thoroughbred type horse that's a little bit nervous, one bump might be enough to get the kind of reaction you want. What kind of a reaction you want? You want to get enough of a reaction that you might even kick the horse into the next gate. You really want to send the message home that you say, hey, I want you to keep going on your own. And what we're going to do, notice I want to make one other point. JJ is not wearing spurs, and that's really, really important. We shouldn't be using spurs for a horse that's not going forward, because the spurs are not used to give stronger aids. When we finally put spurs on, it's so we can use more refined aids. So your job, when we get to the second part of this lesson, which is putting the horse in front of the driving aids, is to get the horse in front of a light leg aid. We don't put spurs on at this point. Now, I know that Maverick has been standing for a while and he's probably fallen asleep a little bit, but what I want you to do just this first time, I always do this, I want you to do this with your horses at home. We need to test just how much you've been helping your horse to keep going. And because Maverick is a little sleepy, JJ's going to have to kick him a little bit to get him going. And when you first do this, I want you to do whatever you have to do to get your horse in a nice marching walk. Marching, marching, marching. Either kick or use the stick or whatever. Then you're going to take your legs completely away from the horse's sides, and we're going to see how long it takes the horse to either slow down or completely stall out and stop. Okay, you got that? So you can kick him a little bit, or as much as you need to, because he's been dozing in the sun here, until you get a nice marching walk. That's right. And just stay on a large circle at this end. Good, good. Now this is nice and marching. Take your legs away and do nothing. And he's still marching, and now he's thinking about slowing down. Don't do anything, just turn him a little bit. So you're on your circle, don't do anything. He's slowing down more and more. He's waiting for her to help him, and she's not. And he's even going slower. And then he stopped. Well, that was perfect. Okay, so bring him back here, JJ. That was perfect. That's exactly what I wanted you to see. Maverick sort of slowed down in stages. He slowed down, and the thought process is she going to help me? Is she going to use a leg aid? She didn't use a leg aid. So I think I'll put a little less effort into this walk. Is she going to help me now? no, she's not going to help me, so I think I'll put even less effort into this walk. And then when he finally realized she wasn't going to give any aids at all, he thought, oh, okay, I'll stop. And it took, maybe 5 or 6 strides before he slowed down the first time, and then every maybe 2 or 3 strides after that, he slowed down a little bit more and a little bit more until finally, from the first moment she took her legs off until he finally stopped, it was just a little bit more than halfway around a 20-meter circle. Now I know if you were to do this with your horse, you would feel the horse starting to slow down, and you would start to give leg aids, or maybe you'd give him a little tap with the whip and you'd keep him marching. That's not what I want you to do. I do not want you to help your horse keep going, because like I said before, if you give aids, if you tap him to keep him in an active walk, an active trot, an active canter, then you're going to use yourself up, and there's going to be no you left when it is time to ask him leg questions. So in a second, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get an active walk any old way we can. JJ's going to take her legs off, and the second Maverick slows down, she's going to make a correction, and she'll decide how much of a correction she has to do to get a huge answer from him. So just walk off for a second, JJ, and stop. Stop. So now JJ, any old way she can, kicking or using the whip or whatever, is going to get this nice marching walk like we did before. Then she's going to take her legs away, and the moment she feels Maverick slow down even 1 ounce, she's going to make a correction. There you go. And she kicked him until he trotted, and then she's going to go back to the walk and take her legs away. Beautiful. And as long as he's marching on his own, you can't hear her because she doesn't have a mic. She's saying, good boy, good Maverick. The second he slows down, like there, kick, 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 kick. And you can even make it a little more wake him up than that, but active walk, legs away. You see how her legs are completely off his side so she doesn't inadvertently help him. She's rewarding him because he's marching on his own. He's going under his own steam. The second he slows down, she'll get after him again. But notice he's going under his own steam for longer and longer periods of time. We're just making new rules. The other thing I want you to notice is that we don't care where Maverick's head is while we're doing any of these forward exercises, because we have to have control of the engine, the hind legs, before we try to put the horse in a frame. Any round frame that you would get before the horse is going on his own, or later on, as you see, being tested to the driving aids, is a false frame. The horse will just be arching his neck and posing as if he's on the bit with just the front end. There won't be any true roundness through his whole body from back to front. Good, good boy, be ready. You have to stay right on top of this. When he's going on his own, he gets praised. He knows when he's testing you, so the second he tests you, yeah, this is good. He's going for longer and longer periods. He's thinking about slowing down there. Be ready, because he knows when he's putting less effort into it. Yeah, good. Good. He almost made it all the way around the circle that time. And then back to the walk and legs away. And this is how you make new rules for the horse. The rules being, I tell you how quickly or how slowly, that's beautiful, praise him, how quickly or how slowly I want you to walk, trot, and canter. Then my responsibility is over. It's your responsibility to maintain this marching walk, this swinging trot, or this springing canter all by yourself with no help from me, so I don't use up my leg aids. That's awesome, JJ. Bring him up to where we were standing before, make a big fuss, and we'll talk about the second aspect of being forward. That was really, really good. So you could see in the beginning, Maverick slowed down fairly early on, and then she made a correction, kick, 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 and he walked a few more strides on his own. But with each correction, he realized, oh, you're almost making your horse a problem solver. He's learning that if he takes responsibility for his gait and keeps marching, 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 life will be wonderful. If he doesn't take responsibility for his gait, then he's going to get a sharp correction. So it becomes his choice. And a lot of times people say, ooh, that's kind of mean that you're kicking like that, or you're hitting with the whip. But what I want you to think about is that at the end of the day, it's a lot kinder to the horse to have legs that are just resting so softly, like the saddle pad, just resting on his side. And every once in a while, if you want to give him an aid to do something, you give a tiny little squeeze with your calf. That's a whole lot kinder and more pleasant for the horse than to be grinding and squeezing and spurring over and over again until the horse finally, through self-preservation, tunes you out. So that's the first aspect of thinking forward that I want to talk about. The fact that the horse has to take responsibility for his gait, and the rider could basically take her legs off and the horse keeps going all by himself. The second aspect of thinking forward is what the horse should do when you actually give an aid. And we're going to talk about just the leg aids in this lesson. You have one leg and you have two legs, and they should mean something different to the horse in the language of the horse, and I'll just go over that briefly. If we were circling to the left here, and JJ's left leg was on the inside, and she were to give just a tiny little squeeze with the calf on that inside leg, what that tells the horse is that you want more activity in the gait that you're in. For example, you're in a walk, you're in a trot, or you're in a canter. And you say, I want more power. One little squeeze in her leg tells the horse to be more active. She could also use both calves. Both calves, we want the language to be very clear to the horse. So one aid means one and only one thing, and when you want to tell the horse to do something different, you have a completely different aid, so he doesn't have to play multiple choice. Two legs, when she lightly presses with two calves, it says to the horse, transition. Do some form of a transition. For example, you're in a walk, you're in a trot, you're in a canter, you close both legs, and it says lengthen in the walk, lengthen in the trot, lengthen in the canter. It tells the horse to do a transition within the gait. Two legs can also ask the horse to do a transition from gait to gait. If JJ were walking and she closed her legs, he should go off into the trot. Also from the halt to the walk, she's going to close both legs. But the point here is whether you use one leg for more activity within a gait or two legs for a transition, we want to give feather light aids. We want to whisper with the aids. Now this is total common sense. This is so logical because I want you to think about it. I don't care how old, how dull, how quiet by nature your horse is. If you turned him out in the field, you see how he just wiggled his skin there? I just touched him with my fingernail. He wiggled his skin, he flicked his tail. No matter how quiet the horse is, they can feel a fly landing on their side. And if they can feel a fly landing on their side, they can feel an aid, a leg aid that is as light as a fly landing on their side. But here's what happens. The horses inadvertently train us to use stronger and stronger aids. For example, you give a light leg aid like a fly, and the horse doesn't respond. So you squeeze a little harder, and they react. And you think, oh, I just needed to use more leg. Okay, those are very dangerous words, more leg. And that'll work for a while until the horse grows dull to that strength of a leg aid. So then you think, oh, I just need to use more leg, and you squeeze even harder. And that works for a while again because it takes the horse by surprise until he sort of numbs out to more leg. Then the next thing you do, because he's not listening to the more leg and you have no more leg to use, you put on little spurs. Once again, notice we don't have spurs on. And that works for a while because that once again takes the horse by surprise until he grows dull to the little spurs. And then before you know it, you have these big honking pizza cutter spurs on your boots and you're digging holes in your horse's sides. So the point is, you want to make the horse attentive, electric, responsive, reactive to an aid that's as light as a fly landing on his side. So I'm going to tell you the process of putting the horse in front of the driving aids. And there are several steps, and it's important that you do all of the steps, because if you miss one of the steps, this whole process is going to backfire. So step one I've already sort of mentioned, which is you make a vow to yourself that you are not going to squeeze any lighter than a fly landing on your horse's side. Okay? You do not adjust your aid to suit the dullness of the horse. Now you can adjust your aid in two ways. You can make it stronger, or you can repeat it and give a second or third aid. You're not going to do that. Basically, you're saying with your tiny little aid, hey baby, this is the aid. I want you to react to that aid. I'm not going to change it. So you make the horse more attentive to you. So when you give that feather light leg aid, the answer that you require from your horse, let's use the word surge. I love that word, S-U-R-G-E. You want to feel a surge from behind, almost like that you were going to have whiplash because the horse was rear wheel drive from that feather light aid pushing from behind. If you get an answer and it's just sort of lackadaisical, just moving off, or there's a delayed reaction, it's time to make a correction. And you know now how to make a correction. You're either going to kick, 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 or whip, 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 or a little bit of both, and you're going to temper, remember, your punishment to the personality of the horse, so that you educate the horse. You tell him through the correction that you've asked him a question, but you don't do so much that you scare the horse. So here's a big place where people make a mistake. You've given a light leg aid, number one. Number two, the horse has not surged forward electrically. So you make a correction. Wham, 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 wham with your legs, tap, tap, tap. And then riders pet him and say, good boy. If that's what you do, you're just teaching your horse to be more dull. Because basically what you're doing is you're rewarding him for reacting to the wham, 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 wham. Okay? And that's not the point. Here's the key. You must go back and do whatever you were doing when you decided you needed to make a correction and retest with the feather light leg aid, if we were using a leg aid. So here's a sort of a rule to live by. Never leave a forward question with a correction. If you've had to make a correction because your horse wasn't listening, always go back to what you were doing before and retest. So if you were doing a transition from halt to walk and the horse just kind of moseyed off and you kicked, you would go back to the walk and you would retest with feather light leg aids. If you were in a pokey trot and you wanted to ask for a more active trot, you would use one leg, the inside leg. You would give one tiny little squeeze. If the horse didn't surge forward, you would make a correction, wham, 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 wham. Then you would slow the horse back down and you would retest with your inside leg again. Here's another place that people get into trouble as they go through this process. And I don't want to scare you about the process. If you do all of the steps, and eventually you'll do them on autopilot, it will always work. Okay? The next place that people make a mistake is when they do the retest, they find themselves saying things like, well, that was better, or that was pretty good. If you find yourself saying it's better or it's pretty good or that was good for him, it is not good enough. You have to wham, 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 make the correction again, and then go back and do the retest again until you feel that rear wheel drive surge. And then when you feel the rear wheel drive surge, that's the time you must praise the horse. To the degree that you've had to make corrections, you have to make just as big of a fuss over the horse to tell him that he's done the right thing. So be careful of words like better and pretty good. And I want to make a comment about that. In training, I basically see everything in shades of gray. I'm happy when the horse goes a little more sideways in a leg yield. I'm happy when a lengthening, he takes slightly longer strides, because we build on those shades of gray. But this in front of the driving aids is the only thing really in training that is black and white. The horse is either 100% hot off a a leg aid that's as light as a fly landing on his side, or it's not good enough. And the reason is, when we're doing this, you'll see once again JJ is not going to care where Maverick's head is. She's not using the reins except just to keep a light contact with his mouth so she can steer him. Okay? When we finally do combine leg and hand later on to put the horse in a shape, if the horse isn't 100% in front of your driving aids at that point, they're going to say, wait a minute, how can I go and stop at the same time? And they're going to choose to stop. They're going to slow down, they're going to shorten their necks, they're going to put their hindquarters sideways. So as an insurance policy, we need to know, and I'm going to exaggerate, that your horse is 150% hot off a feather light leg aid before we do anything with the reins to put him in a round shape. Okay, so in a second here, we're going to have JJ check. We're going to do some transitions we're going to start from halt to walk with feather light aids. And knowing that poor Maverick has had to stand here for quite a while, I'm assuming that JJ is going to have to make a correction. We'll do that in a second. So the first transition that JJ is going to ask Maverick to do is to surge forward, which we know he's not going to do because he's been standing for a long time, from halt to walk. She's going to lightly press with both calves, and let's see what he does. And wham, 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 wham. Because the leg aid was too big, we want to use leg aids that are invisible. And although he walked forward, it wasn't a surge. Here comes the important part. She goes back to the halt and retest, good, and pet him a lot. Now he did trot, and we only wanted halt to walk, but at least he was thinking forward. This next time, that was quite good, JJ, and you saw the reward there. This next time, I don't want to see you use your leg aid. I want it so light, we're going to raise the standard here of how he should react. So halt, ever so lightly close your calves, and surging forward. I would give him a kick for that. That a girl. See, and she overdoes the correction to send the message home. And then halt, and so light, so light with the legs. Yeah, you see the rear wheel drive, and she petted him a lot. Stay in the walk, that was super. Now we're going to do the same thing from walk to trot. Once again, it is a transition. So she's going to use two legs so lightly that we can't see, and she's going to evaluate whether he surges with rear wheel drive. If he does, she pets him. If not, she makes a correction. That's right. That was an example of a pretty good response, but it wasn't 100%. So she made a correction. Yeah, good boy. And then she did the retest, and then she praised him. Let's do that once more. Transition, oh, you see the rear wheel drive? Now he cantered, even though we didn't want him to canter. It shows that he's really in front of her leg right now. That was very good. So now JJ, this time, ever so lightly close your legs, go into the trot, but once you're in the trot, drain all the impulsion out of the trot. Go rising, and I want a pokey trot, and we're going to use inner leg to activate the trot. And she's going to give one tiny little squeeze, and I want the trot to get brighter. And if it doesn't, she's going to, that's right, she makes the correction. Notice she doesn't fuss with his head. She leaves his head alone. She slows him back down. Good, and tell him good boy. And she gave a tiny little squeeze, and he surged forward, and she praised him. Let's do that whole thing. Oh, super. Excellent. Let's do the whole thing again. Go pokey trot. And then you make a value judgment. Gee, I'd like a little more impulsion in this trot. So one, yep, she gave a tiny squeeze. He didn't answer. She made a correction. Here comes the important part, the retest. Ah, super, and make a big fuss, and then bring him up here, and he can stand here. Super. That was awesome. Good boy, Maverick. That was great. You can see, you want to raise the bar, you want to raise the standard, and it's all very logical. You know for a fact if your horse was turned out, he would feel a fly on his side. So there is no reason that he can't react to a leg aid that's as light as a fly landing on his side. But it's up to you as the horse's trainer to say to him, I'm going to whisper with my aides, and you're going to shout your answer, and not the other way around. And I know if you follow this system, you're going to have a whole lot more fun riding your horse, and you're not going to be exhausted at the end of the ride. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson.